Welcome back to the roundtable discussion. I have got going with some awesome strongmen, Jerry Pritchett, Lauren Chalet, Terry Hollins. And today we are talking squat for reps, strongest man on earth 2024 at the Shaw Classic. And squat is an event that, I know, Lawrence, you love, right? And a lot of these guys haven't necessarily got to get tested in a squat adequately. I mean, we've seen, the squat setup at World's Strongest Man, for example, with the big globes and you're coming down and touching. And, there's different ways potentially to manipulate an event like that where your hips don't have to go quite as low, things like that. So the setup, we're building an entirely new setup for the contest, right? So this is something that I think is going to look incredible. It's actually, kind of a throwback, if you will, to the Playboy Bunny squat from World's Strongest Man years and years ago. Now, we're not loading it with women.
We're putting us four on, right?
that would be fun. That would be fun.
That's proper strength, not lifting a Playboy Bunny. Let's lift off us four, then I'll be impressed.
I mean, as long as I guess you guys could be dressed however you wanted to be dressed, but it's going to be fun. So we're gonna have the event set up. If it comes to fruition the way that we've got it drawn up, it's going to be really, really cool. So the guys will not have to control the bar front to back, right? So the bar will adjust to each competitor's height. So they're all going to get set to the same depth. It should be very fair across the board. And then they're going to come down and touch. Now, the interesting part of this that I'm trying to get done is, and hopefully it will play out, is I'm not a big fan, and we can talk through this. I'm not a big fan of the guys coming down and slamming the weight down and bouncing it back up, right? So I'm actually working with a scale company on this particular event where the guys, and we need to test this. This is going to need to be tested adequately, but the guys are going to have a tolerance level that they can bring the weight down at. Right? So they can't drop it completely, or else if it goes above that tolerance level, the rep won't count. So it's going to be able to measure that. And we're playing with this in testing. So it's going to be that. On top of it, with this event, we're actually building in force plates into the floor of the squat. So showing within the live stream and for the fans, the power output of these guys when they squat back up, right? So it's going to be a set weight, but we're going to see the power of how much force these guys can produce when they're actually squatting. And then also it'll have a right and left leg. So we'll get to see if there's any type of imbalance potentially from the guys, if they're, as they get tired, for example, if one of their legs kind of gives out before the other one, that type of thing. So a few different things where we're trying to up the sports science kind of game here. But the competitors will all come down and be set to that same depth, everybody across the board. It's going to be a squat for reps, still dialing in the exact weight that the guys will use. But it's going to be in the neighborhood of that 800 pounds, maybe low 800 pounds. So like 363, I think, is 800 pounds, maybe to 370, like somewhere in that type of range. So no suits are allowed. The guys, however, are allowed to wrap their knees. They just can't bring a chair out to the competition floor. So if they want to wrap their knees and walk out, they can walk out. But, it's one of those things where it's a risky one, because if you wrap your knees too tightly and get out there and get set, by the time you start, you don't want your legs going to sleep, right? So that's a factor that all the competitors have to take into play. But this one's going to be fascinating, man. I want to get your guys' thoughts on the breakdown and what you think and how it'll play out potentially.
So what you said everyone's going to be set to a depth. Is it everyone's going to be parallel? Is that how you're going to do it, or is it a range of motion? Or
so it'll be very, very close to parallel, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to work. We'll have our head judges will be Mark Philippi and Ed Cohen. So those will be the guys setting it. I'm very confident they'll be very fair across the board with everybody, but everybody will have to come down to that depth. So the apparatus itself will adjust. So everybody will get set in the testing day to the correct depth, and then you'll come down and touch. So you'll have to touch, but again, that's where you can't dive bomb it to just slam the whole thing. I mean, there's a couple different reasons, and we could certainly talk about that. In my mind, number one, I don't want to put the guys at a higher injury risk. So if you take tension out of the system and squat to the bottom and then fire back up, I think there's a higher risk of injury. I also just I don't think it's as good of a test as strength, right? So like if you have to control it, you'll come down and hit depth, but that depth gauge is also the safety of the apparatus. So none of the guys can get crushed. So they'll come down, they can touch that and come back up. If they fail, that'll be the lowest point they can go to as well. So it's kind of a safety built in, but you know, it's also a depth gauge too.
Brian, you said not gonna have to control back and forth, so it's gonna be like a Smith machine type setup, like in a guide.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it won't be exactly like a Smith machine, but that's it's a good analogy, right? Because it'll be a set bar path that goes up and down,
like the old early '80s World's Strongest Man squat, where it was in the platform with the cage and had guides. And
the weight will be above the guy's head. Yeah. They'll walk into it, and it should look epic. I mean, honestly, like the weight will all be above their head. It'll be like, you know, you're an animal just lifting weight right in the middle of it. So
all out power pressing that thing up.
Yeah. And it should, I mean, again, this one is being tested, and this is going to be the hardest one, I think, from a testing perspective to get it right. But we'll do everything necessary to get it dialed in. So it'll be very cool. The guys should all have a great, you know, opportunity to show off their leg power, right? Like that's at the end of the day, that's what we want. So
I'm hoping somebody bring back that platform squat forever now. Yeah, that was always a cool lift, I thought, in Worlds.
I hope I hope the fans are excited, but I hope the guys are excited. You know, like I know for me, I always loved some type of new piece of equipment when it was done. And it just is, instead of competing on the same thing, it's like, all right, cool. I've got to figure this out, and I've got to figure out how to train for it. And then it's, you don't know, like this one. I mean, I was trying to write down the guys, and I think there's a list of squatters that could be incredible, but some of them we haven't necessarily got to see them perform in a squat. And then also it's a different squat than where you're at with the axle setup, because primarily in strongman, I mean, for a long time, I mean, we're talking at this point 15 plus years, that's kind of been what the squat setup was. Is
either globes on it or the keg in the apparatus that was a pivot.
Lever squat. Yep.
Which was really, you know, completely different squat, because you weight pushed against the apparatus, like the car deadlift, you know, is completely different.
Yeah, we tried to do that car squat back in 2021 with the contest, and there was just way too much flex and play in the frame of that, and I was very disappointed overall with that event. It was just, you know, trying to get the guys set to the right depth, and then if they, you know, there's some manipulation there, so everything will be dialed in, I think, on the floor as well, to get their stance right. Like all of these little details with the event, like the guys will have to set up, their feet will be recorded, the shoes they're in will be recorded, like all of this stuff, so that they can't walk out there and take a different stance and get, you know, in a different position. So
but I know that it would help them in a glide that's going to go straight up and down. If you tried to cheat it and move your feet forward or something, you're going to lose your power in this anyway. Yeah. Where like the one that moved like a lever, you know, that they can go with that arc, that was an advantage, right? You can kind of push out as you're pushing against that arc, but straight up and down squat that you're stuck in that glide, really you're not going to help yourself by trying to cheat your stance from what you originally set.
And if you the way that we're doing it too, and we'll test this as well, but if you put pressure back for whatever reason, right, like forward or back, the way the machine is going to move, it should not hinder the movement. So it's not going to bind up. So if you, for example, were to set up and you're like, hey, my feet are a touch forward here, and you're putting pressure back, it's not going to bind, like it's not going to bend or move. It's going to all go together. So ideally you would want your force to go straight up into the bar. So all the guys will be able to unload it in the testing, let them get their foot placement right, get it dialed in correctly, and get a good feel of this thing before they ever have to squat. And then we'll, in addition to that, I'm sure you guys will appreciate this, we're going to have a monolift in the back with the same type of bar. That's literally what they'll get to warm up with. So it won't be like, hey, we're going to pull in the forklift and you guys will squat off the forklift. It's none of that. Like, I'm going to try to, all of those little details in the back end, I want the guys to be able to perform, you know? So we're going to try to have every little thing in the back done, but you know.
You sound like we've had that before.
Yeah. Lawrence, I want your thoughts on this one, man, because I know you love squat. I'm sure you would have been excited for this.
I would have been super excited for this event. And, you know, I was always someone that thought if you train squats, particularly more Olympic high bar type squats, you can adapt to any type of squat in strongman. Sometimes if you're so used to having everything perfect for powerlifting, it can throw people off. And we've seen that before with some great powerlifters come into strongman and just struggle a bit, particularly like with an axle on their back rather than a perfectly knurled bar, or, you know, be a world's strongest man where you're on a slant somewhere. It's you need that ability to adapt. We have some very, very good squatters in this show. I mean, Hafthor, his squats are looking very, very good. Mitch Hooper is squatting some crazy numbers. His quads on him, you know, he's very, very powerful. Lucas Hatton, he's getting into the heads of some of the other athletes I've seen.
He's looking a little chippy. Yeah.
He is. But he's looking strong, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he can do. I think Austin Andrade looks like he's built to squat. That guy, you know, he's a powerful looking athlete. I'm excited to see what he can do. Others as well. It's an event in the past that Tom Stoltman has struggled on. We've seen him struggle at the Arnold's. But he looked incredible at World's Strongest Man, and you'd think he'd have put the work in since then to come back and be a lot stronger. This could be an interesting event for the overall competition again. Already a very tough day to get through day one, and then starting off with a super heavy squat for reps. Personally, I would have loved it. I think, again, we're going to see athletes that can come out and smash this, and then other athletes that really, really struggle.
What do you think? Just a quick question. Do you think with this being a machine squat, do you think that maybe would make it less of an issue for someone like Tom, or do you think it still just stays the same?
Hard to say with someone like Tom. He's such a big, tall athlete that sometimes just you almost feel like you're caged inside something like this. Yeah. So maybe he would prefer the freedom. But then I say that, and Thor looks very comfortable squatting. So they're both similar in height. I just think I think Thor's focused quite hard on his squat over the sort of end of his career, if you like, and then he's getting back into it now. He's done a bit of powerlifting as well. Tom has the potential, you know, he's just a freakishly strong man, potential to do anything he likes. And I think with focused training on his squat could be very, very good. It just, has he put the work into it? I think if he hasn't, it's going to be an issue. If he has, and you'd expect him to, he should be well prepared.
If you was to train this now, though, if you was to train for this event, would you train it on, say, something like a Smith machine, or would you train it just as a free bar squat?
Personally, I'd train it as a free bar squat. And the reason being, unless you have the exact machine, a Smith machine could throw you off, because even Smith machines are different. You get different variations of different Smith machines. I always found, people always ask me, like, you know, unless you have the exact bit of kit that you're using, like people ask about a car deadlift or a squat machine, all you need to be able to do is adapt by figuring it out in the testing. So if you can kind of have a play around with testing, see where your feet need to be, as long as you are strong in terms of your leg power and your pulling power, you should be able to adapt to any type of squat or deadlift. That's my philosophy. Obviously, if you have the kit to train on, it's a big advantage because you know all the specifics. But none of the athletes have that luxury. They're all coming to this competition. It's all going to be the first time that they get to touch it. And the best squatter will win. From what Brian said, the testing is going well with it. Like you said, a few years ago, that squat, it was wrong. You know, it didn't work out how you wanted it to. 100%. And you've learned from that. And, you know, I think you'll get it absolutely spot on this time around. And I think we'll see the best squatter come out and win.
Yeah. I think it's been from what we saw, you know, a couple of years ago at the Arnold with more of a regular squat. You know, I think some of the guys are almost afraid of it a little bit, because we haven't seen that a lot in strongman, you know, going after big weights in the squat. You know, there's a lot of commitment getting under a squat bar, you know, riding
It's scary. It's one of those events that weight is going to crush you. It's not like a deadlift. You can let go of a deadlift.
There's a little
but
more,
a squat bar is coming down.
Some of that fear, I think, can go away being in some an apparatus that, you know, you're not going to get crushed, right? You're not relying on, you know, a couple spotters going to catch the bar and some foam pads. Like, you know, you're safe. You know, so that's a big mental, you know, boost right there, you know, where you can attack it and not be worried about it. Where I felt like watching some of the guys, like there was a little bit of worry getting under that bar, you know, and hoping everybody's going to catch me if something goes wrong here, you know. I think that's going to be a big change.
You know, the interesting one, and we're talking about Tom, and I think it is a very interesting point, is if he performs well in the stone, at the end of day one, he will get to go last on this, or at least in the last 3 or whatever, wherever he places. So from a strategy standpoint, he's going to know what reps to put up, right? Like he knows kind of where he needs to go. Now, the other interesting part, and I would be curious to your guys' opinion, like for me, I would with this one, I would not wrap my knees. I would just wear a tight knee sleeve and go that way, because I would want to do enough reps where that would become a factor, right? So, you know, for the guys that are going out there, maybe, you know, Terry, I know in the past you've kind of gone into squat events and said, hey, look, I got to get 3 reps. I got to get 2 reps. That's what I'm going to do. Maybe you would wrap your knees tighter. I don't know, going into it. Or what would you think? Like, do the knee wraps come into play? Like it's, you know, one of these things where there's a strategy within that too. Because if you're uncomfortable, you got to hurry up. And, you know, it's, if your legs go to sleep, it's a problem, you know?
Personally, I would wrap my knees, but I wouldn't wrap them the same as I would for a 1 rep max.
Got it.
So I would be using a looser knee wrap, as opposed to if you're just going for 1 rep max, you want them on as cranked as possible, getting out, you know, it's 1 rep. Whereas when it's repetitions, I personally still like the support of the knee wraps. However, I do a slightly different wrap that allows me a little bit more freedom in the legs. I know I'm not going to kind of lose that blood straight away after 1 rep.
I actually got Jerry's pal to wrap my knees at World's Strongest Man. I think it was Commerce Casino, and he did a great job of them. They were like tight, but not too tight. They were perfect. Yeah, I actually, yeah, I did. I would wrap my knees, but I probably, the fact that I've got a sort of, actually for me, I mean, for me, like, let's be honest, my squatting was never the best. This would probably be like a 1 rep max for me almost. But if you've got to walk from out the back out to the arena with them wrapped, you wouldn't want to have them too tight anyway, because obviously if you crank those knee wraps up really tight, you know, you've got about 30 seconds until the bottoms of your legs are going numb.
And taking the right wrap as well, because there's some wraps that are going to be cast-like, and there's some that are more kind of bungee, you know, got a little more to them. That's the kind of wrap I would go with on this. That way, you're not going to, even if you're got somebody wrapping their knees, they're not going to get them too tight. Where if you have a really stiff wrap, yeah, you're on the risk of getting them way too tight for something you're going to try to reps on. So it's picking a wrap as well. You want something that's kind of got that kind of spongy, you know, not a real stiff wrap. But I would definitely wrap, especially, you know, a heavy squat like this where, you know, you're not going to go out and do 12, 15 reps more than likely, like we've seen it, you know, the lower 7s we've seen at Worlds, you know. So I think I would imagine most of the guys I would think would wrap on this.
How many reps do you think are possible with that type of load?
Really hard to say, because I mean, if it's genuinely up at the like 370, 380 kilos, as if it was a back squat, that's extremely heavy.
Yeah.
You know, but on a machine, it doesn't always feel quite as heavy. You know, the stability won't be an issue. It's more about just driving up. It's a very, very hard one to pick the right number with, I feel, as opposed to if it was just a free bar. Like a free bar, I think even 5 reps with that would be pretty good for a lot of these guys, especially based on what I've seen before. But we may see close to double figures. It just depends how much harder or easier the machine makes it. That's, you know, that's the honest answer. Without trying it, I couldn't give you a proper answer to it.
I think that's completely fair. Yeah.
And the apparatus is going to be the biggest variable there on how the apparatus feels. But you can see a lot of triples 4 or 5. But I think it's possible you see some guys up to 8, 9, 10. Some of your bigger squad.
Yeah, I mean the goal would be is probably the winner is around that double digit mark, maybe 10, 11, 12, maybe, right? But once you start getting into that realm, it's too many reps, right? Like I think it's just too many reps. So I think you're going to have some guys that'll zero it at that type of weight. I think that's very likely. And then I think that your winner is probably in that 8 or 9 type of rep range, maybe 10. Like somebody really has to go to the well.
You got to think it's day 2 after a very heavy day 1. With the max deadlift, the max stone, the heavy press medley. So you're not going to come in day 2 feeling the greatest.
Yeah.
So that's going to change.
I think if we see 8 to 10 as the winning number, you got it perfect.
Let's get that done. let's make that happen, man. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think we've haven't talked a ton about the names, but I'm fascinated to see like guys like Matt Ragg. Obviously, you mentioned Lucas Hatton, Hooper, Hofthor, Austin, Thomas Evans, maybe Bobby Thompson. Like, what can his squat get back to? I think the guys that are questions here will be somebody like, again, an Evan. I know he's kind of said he doesn't like squats particularly well. And, some of the other guys in the contest, like, are there upsets in this? Are there guys that come in that were, because we haven't really seen squatting, right? Like you just haven't seen it that much. And there's several new names where it's kind of an unknown,
Hey, Brian,
absolutely.
why does the apparatus can be far as like getting your hands into the bar?
There will be no problem. No problem.
I mean, years you get a bar, like you can't get into the damn thing because it's so narrow.
No, it's good. I promise, Jerry, it will not be narrow. Tom,
well, I was wide it was going to be.
Yeah. So it's overall the entire thing. It's probably going to be about, I would guess, about 10 feet wide. So it'll be a massive structure when it's done. So it should look epic. That's the whole goal of it. But also, as long as it performs to that standard where the guys get tested adequately, you get that form and function type of mix where we want it to look like I want all of you guys, hopefully, but everybody else and the athletes to walk in and say, wow, what is that? Right? Like that's the factor within strongman that separates it, right? Because again, just like things like the car leg press, it's like, you could put normal weight on the leg press and most people wouldn't look twice. They'd say, okay, you got a lot of plates on there, cool. But if you put a car on top of it, now everybody wants to stop and look. So, and it's just fun, right? Like we have to make strongman fun. We have to make it entertaining. And
I get a visual for the crowd, like the car leg press. I mean, it was shared on ESPN,
Yeah.
Share or squat or leg press is a car, like it grabs that attention, where they said a regular leg press, a regular squat, they wouldn't even pay attention to it.
It's not, I'll say it's not easy. It's not easy.
But this is what sets our sport apart from powerlifting and weightlifting. It's the visual thing and the fact that the general public can see it's something that's impressive and heavy. Yeah. Like to most people, 400 pounds or 800 pounds means nothing to them because 400 pounds is more than they can lift.
Yeah. It's that concept of strength. I mean, I'd say this, it's going to be exciting. I mean, like you guys, all would attack this, I think, in different ways, and there's all strategy with it. And, seeing these athletes come in with their strategy after day 1 into this event, day 2, you got to get the day started right. And some of these guys are going to, especially if you're in that kind of striking spot of being toward the top, you have to make a move on day 2, right? Like you got to come out and start it off hard. And I think that's what's going to be interesting with this one is who starts out with a bang, who puts up the big number, and then who can top it, right? Like I think the level is going to be very high with this one. And I think that this could be like Lauren said, I think this is going to dictate potentially who could be really making that move to be on top of that podium,
Yeah, absolutely. The other factor is like, it's a 2-day competition. They're going to start day 2 feeling beat up. But you get off to a good start and suddenly that adrenaline's going through you, feel good and you want to keep pushing. If it goes badly and you're feeling sore still and you know you've still got 3 more events to go and it's not started well, sometimes that confidence is knocked and you just feel like you're slipping away. It can affect you. So it's an important one to start strong on.
I love it.
Yeah. We'll see where we go.
It's gonna be fun. It'll be fun. So squat for reps, strongest runner 2024. If you guys want more info, click on the link below. Appreciate you guys joining me today. And man, I'm getting really, really excited. This is gonna be a lot of fun.